What's going on, everybody? Hope you're having a happy Saturday morning. This is Gunzpicks, and we are back with the Gunzpicks College Football Preview Show 2023. Let's get it going. Let's get it live this morning. What's going on? And I am now joined. We already broke down the SEC last week. 2 episodes. If you want to go check them out, go check them out on the the Sports Wagering Network YouTube channel. And this is episode number 3, and we're going to be breaking down the Big Ten East today. And I brought a very special guest who's going to break down the entire Big Ten with me. You can see him on wagertalk.com. He's a sports handicapper since 2011, and we met in what was an electric March Madness first week. And this is my guy here, Bryan Power. You can find him on Twitter at Bryan Power Wins. What's going on, my friend? How you been?
Not much, man. I'm feeling alive this morning. That intro, man, got me going. I know we're under sub 60 days to the start of the college football season, I think it is. And
it's 49 days to week 0.
Okay, 49. Yeah, that's right, to week 0. So, I'm ready to go. I'm fired up. Your intro got me fired up. I don't know if the Big Ten East, how many hot takes I'm going to have in this division. I think a lot of people probably have their mind made up on how this division is going to go.
Right.
But and I'm not going to disagree with a lot of that. But very excited, obviously, to be here, man. It should be a good time, and I think we got a lot of good stuff to say about these 7 teams in the next hour.
Absolutely. I was like, we were talking backstage. It's like, yeah, this is probably the boring side because basically you have like very top heavy side of the conference, and then the next one, the one tomorrow that we're going to break down is going to get a little bit more competitive, and there's going to be some interesting spots to take, especially for win totals. But let's get this thing started right. Gotta get the blood pumping a little bit. So I always play the CBS song because it just grabs me a little bit. But we're gonna start this out here, Big Ten fashion. Start with the low hanging fruit, as they say. We're gonna start with the Indiana Hoosiers here. So let the song play a little bit. There we go. All right, this is Bloomfield, Illinois. Tom Allen still coaching the team. They're facing the 16th toughest schedule. They're 4-8 last year, 2-7 in the conference. 8 returning starters on this one. I'll start with you, Bryan. What are your thoughts on the Hoosiers this season?
Well, I think they're going to be a last place team. I think we're starting with them for a reason. And I look at the early season schedule. Here's the problem, too. They're the least experienced team in the conference. They lost a lot of key people via the transfer portal. And you look at the schedule. They open with Ohio State. And it's a home game, too. So, obviously, if these bad teams, no matter what the conference, are to improve, you want to get your winnable games at home. Because obviously, bad teams are more likely to win at home than they are on the road. But, starting at home against Ohio State, they've got Louisville in Indianapolis. Louisville, I think, is an improved team. Akron coming to Bloomington is not going to be that. I think Akron's an improved team. And then you've got at Maryland, at Michigan. All of a sudden, Guns, it's the middle of October, and Indiana may not have more than 1 or 2 wins. And when you're dealing with a young team, things can go off the rails pretty quickly. Coming into the year, they've lost 16 of 18 games in the conference already, only covered 5. Right. From a betting perspective, maybe we're starting to see some value, right? Because obviously, everyone's going to pick Indiana for last. So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see what kind of number we can get. I don't have it in front of me. What are they getting against Ohio State? It's obviously going to be a huge number. Right. But I don't know. Yeah, there's not a lot to like in Bloomington coming into the year.
Yeah, I can agree with you on this one. It's like, they lose their quarterback in Connor Blazak last year. He goes to the portal. So really, they're kind of left with a lot of like youth on that one. They did get a transfer from Tennessee to take over at quarterback. They also have a true freshman in Brock Lowry. I don't know who's going to be the starter on that one. And when you don't know who your starter is in, July, August or whatever, and you're making the decision a week before week 1, that's a tough spot for any team. They lose their top running back and Sean Shivers too. They retain their other 3 top rushers, but I don't think that really matters. They get back 3 out of 4 receivers. I guess that's a promise on them, but who's going to be throwing these guys the ball? That's going to be the question on this one. O-line, 4 starters back for them, and they get a transfer from UMass. They do get a new O-line coach in there. This is a team that was absolutely bad offensive line last year. They had a 7.9% sack rate, 38 sacks, and they only rushed for 3.4 yards per carry. The uh, defensive line's in a full rebuild. Uh, Linebackers, they do get their top tackler back in Aaron Casey. And they also add a nice transfer from Stanford that has a lot of experience. He was 4 years with Stanford. So at least with the linebacker core, it should be in decent shape. Secondary, they basically just flooded with transfers to kind of fill in the voids in this one. This was a team that was just absolutely awful at coverage last year, 274 yards, giving up 64.1% pass completion rate to their opponents. And then you look at their schedule to boot on this one. What a tough schedule. 16, like I said, 16 toughest in the country. They basically have road games against Maryland, Michigan, and Penn State. They get Wisconsin at home, and of course, they got Ohio State in week 1, which is not bode well for this team. The Hoosiers lost 30 players from last season, but they had 25 transfers. So this team just looks way different than it was before. I don't know if Tom Allen has the magic that he put together in 2020 left in his wand, but I think this team is going to be Tank City. But I will say, from a promising standpoint, when you look at them down the road, they actually had their best recruiting class
Yes.
in the history of the school. I think they were ranked 30th or something like that as far as sports 247 sports rankings are concerned. So we'll see down the road if there's any potential of this team. But right now, I don't really have a play on any of the team totals in this one, but I just think they're going to be a bad team, along with some other teams we're going to talk about on this show. Want to shout out 29 on this one. He says, I know, jacked about college football here for the vibes. That's what we're talking about. All right, let's go to the next team on the list. And another bad team. We'll get to the good teams here, folks, but we have to start the show slow rolling, and then we'll amp up here. Let's talk about the Scarlet Knights of Rutgers, New Brunswick, New Jersey. Greg Schiano back under, I think it's his 3rd year with the team this season. 31 toughest schedule, 4-8, 1-8 in the conference. 14 returning starters for this team, 6 on the offense, 8 on the defensive side. I don't have a lot of notes on this team, but I have a little bit to talk about. What are your thoughts, Bryan?
Look, I think Schiano is building the team in the right way. I mean, it's just so tough because their ceiling is like middle of the division. You knew it was going to be tough what he inherited. They start okay. They got Northwestern to open the year, so that's a winnable game. Then Temple, I think, though, is going to be tough as a home game because I like Temple this year a little bit to go. That's a team I think could go over their win total. And then they got Virginia Tech. They, unlike Indiana, I think could open up with some wins. But again, there's just such a gulf that we keep talking about. I mean, from a betting perspective, they get the schedule doesn't set up great. They have a weird FCS game in the middle of the schedule. And then they've got Wisconsin is off a bye and Michigan State is off a bye when they play them. So all of a sudden, and they have to go to Indiana. That's one of Indiana's winnable games. So for what is Rutgers' ceiling? I guess it's just getting out of last place and finishing ahead of Indiana is what I would get. I mean, it's a more veteran squad. Again, they didn't improve a ton last year, but, I see them continuing to improve kind of by just small steps. And again, they're going to finish the second to last.
Yeah. I can agree with you. I agree with you on this one. Some tough road games similar to Indiana. I mean, we're talking about Michigan, Wisconsin, at Iowa, at Penn State. They have to play Ohio State at home, and it's reluctant that these bad teams get a home game against Ohio State, a team I think we're going to talk about. We actually, are kind of like this year. And then, the quarterback situation for them is similar spot. You don't know who the starter is on this one. They do have a talented guy that I don't think a lot of people are talking about, Johnny Shepard, dual threat option. And with the quarterbacks that are in front of him, I don't think they were really, sparking the offense at all. I think one of them had a 44% completion rate, if I remember correctly, when I was looking at the numbers. Top running back comes back at Samuel Brown. who had a great year as a freshman. I think he could really have a big year this year, especially with a struggling offense. They're going to have to find a way to get some sort of production. Start from scratch on the wide receivers, offensive line, 3 starters back. Um, and last year, this group only blocked for a 3.6 yards per carry rushing, 8.1% sack rate. So there's only one way to go, but up. They have to improve there. Defensively, D-backs, they lose 3 starters, including their top cornerback, but they get back 4 corners with starting experience this season. They also get some transfers from Akron and Minnesota to help along the way. Um, and then on the linebacker core, 3 returning starters, including their number 1 tackler. Maybe a little bit of experience boost for this Rutgers team, but with the schedule that they have, and of course against ranked opponents, Shiano has not done well. 4-27 straight up versus top 25 opponents. There's actually a lot of teams in the Big Ten that really have that struggle, and we'll talk about Michigan State next. That's another one. So not nothing. This team's kind of boring to me. This team is not really, are they going to be competing for a bowl spot? We'll see, I guess. But 4 wins last year, only 1 conference win last year. I don't know. This is kind of a team I'm kind of ignoring. Maybe find some spots along the way, week to week, if this team shows some improvement.
Yeah. I was going to say, you talk about boring, back-to-back years averaging under 20 points per game. That's not going to get it done. I mean, but I would expect the offense to be better. I would expect the defense to be better this year. They do lose. Their punter was great, and they lost him. So the third phase, that believe it or not, like people could, oh my God, how big of a deal is the punter? Their punter was really good. So, that's something that I guess keep an eye on too, that they won't have that edge in the third phase.
Yeah, I think that having a good punter is underrated. I mean, look at San Diego State years back when they had Ariza. I mean, he was kicking the ball. I mean, granted, that's a little bit of an outlier there because he was kicking the ball 90 yards down the field when they were like way deep in the territory. But yeah, that's going to be a missing piece for them as well. So we'll see how it goes for the Scarlet Knights. Next team that we're going to be talking about in this one is Mel Tucker Land, East Lansing, Michigan. They have a tough schedule. Third toughest in the country this year, ranked 13 starters back. Added a lot of guys, mass exodus after the spring sessions. 5-7 last year, 3-6, and I think Michigan State higher ups are going, did we make a mistake with Mel Tucker? We shall see. But what are your thoughts on the Spartans this year, Brian?
So my thought is this: whenever you see a team drop from 11-2, which was Michigan State's record 2 years ago, to 5-7 last year, I almost always assume there will be a bounce back, right? It's like the plexiglass principle, they call it in baseball. I don't know if I see it here though with this team. Like I don't know. Like you brought up Mel Tucker. There's been a lot of rumblings that was like a quick overreaction, because remember, people weren't expecting a lot, and then like they got off to that great start in 2021, and they immediately rewarded him. And since then, it's just sort of been, he beat Michigan 2 years ago. That's Michigan's only Big Ten loss in the last 2 years. But I don't know. You talked about the mass exodus, including like people leaving after the spring. That's never a good sign. This team's ceiling is just getting back to a bowl. That they are absolutely not a player in this division like they were, under D'Antonio for so many years. So I don't know. Like normally I would want to say, oh yeah, this is a lot. This is an easy team that you can call for a little bit of a bounce back after a 6-win drop off. But I'm not so sure. Looking at them, there is just a mass. I mean, they're definitely not as good as Maryland, the next team we're going to talk about.
Right.
So, I mean, they're very. It's pretty straightforward. You teased it at the open. It's kind of boring almost, but like the bottom 3 are very much the bottom 3 in that order. It's going to be Indiana and last, and then to be honest, Rutgers could finish ahead of Michigan State.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you on this one. Plus, when you look at the schedules, well, it's night and day with this one. Michigan State's just got a god-awful schedule this year, and especially what has happened with the team since April. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, Thorne taking off, transferring to Auburn, a place where I don't even think he's going to be the starting quarterback there, which is kind of an interesting move. So they're kind of like left with, a sophomore and a freshman to kind of take over the role. I don't even know if they're ready for this spot. The top running back for Michigan State and Jalen Berger. They do get him back, but they lose a lot of depth. They did add some guys in the transfer portal from UCF and UConn, but I don't know if this is going to be enough depth to get that production that Michigan State used to have when they had Walker. But like you said, it's like when you see a 5-win team, usually you get a lot of the guys back, so that's a good key indication. You probably got yourself a bowl team at the very least. But breaking down this, it seemed like everybody was not buying into what Mel Tucker said. You had just so many people leave, and then when you have the wide receiver group, they lose their top 2 receivers and their top tight end. So they basically had to scramble to go get players to fill in the roles. So they went to the transfer portal there. O line, 4 returning starters. They did add some help from the transfer portal to get some guys for the JUCO. This group only gave up 18 sacks last year, 4.4% sack rate, 3.8 yards per carry for the running backs. So not bad as far as the offensive line is concerned. Defensively, D-line only loses 1 starter, but they add a A&M transfer and a JUCO D lineman to fill in the depth. So that really they have a lot of depth on the defensive line. So that's promising for them. Linebackers last year full of injuries, so they're transitioning to they transitioned halfway through the season. If everyone doesn't remember, they were a 4-3. I think they transferred to a 3-4. So they try to get some sort of better defensive production. 4 linebackers back with starting experience, so there's potential there. And then on the D back side, they do lose their 2 best coverage guys, but it's not like that's a big loss to them. They were giving up 66.4 pass completion rate to their opponents, 238 yards passing. And then we talk about their schedule. Like I mentioned, 3rd toughest schedule in the country. Washington is probably their top non-conference game that they have to play. They do get Michigan at home this season. They have to go to the Shoot and play Ohio State. And of course, they have last game of the season. They have to go and play Penn State, neutral field at Detroit. But so many issues with this team. Key losses offensively with no replacements to fill in. Schedule real tough. And I was just trying to find their wins. And the over and under for the wins on this one is 5.5. You're basically just saying, is this a bowl team or is this not a bowl team? To me, I'm looking at this. I don't see a bowl team. So that's why I'm thinking under 5.5 wins would be the appropriate pick on this one. What are your
Yeah,
thoughts?
and here's the thing. We know about the big boys in this division, right? But they have to play both Indiana and Rutgers on the road. That's a real tough
Yeah.
break schedule-wise because, obviously those are the 2 teams that, we've got ranked below them. We've already talked about. But are they going to win both of those games on the road, Sparty? I probably wouldn't bet on that. And remember, you mentioned the Washington game. That was where Sparty's season sunk last year. Remember, they were number 11 in the country.
Mm-hmm.
They go across the country to Seattle. They were a 3-point dog. It's always that's always been one of my favorite handicapping spots, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you've got an unranked team favored over a ranked team,
Mm-hmm.
and Washington beats them in Seattle, and Michigan State just fell right out of the top 25 and was never hurt. Their only 3 conference wins were all 1-score games. So, not only was it a bad year, it could have been much worse. One of them was a double overtime game. I had them in that Wisconsin game because I thought it was like the ultimate buy low spot.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, this team was pretty close to just doing next to nothing in the conference last year. So I'm not seeing the natural bounce back. And yeah, it might get worse before it gets better for Mel Tucker in East Lansing.
Yeah, I mean, when are you going to put this guy in the hot seat? I know you did sign him to this egregious extension, but when do you have to pull the ripcord and just say, we have to make a move here? We'll see if it's this season, is it next season? Who knows what's going on with the Sparties, but they are in some Dutch right now. Looking forward to them in the 2023 season. But enough about the Sparties. Let's go into where I am sitting currently within the state of Maryland. College Park, probably 35 minutes down the road from where I'm sitting right now. And Mike Loxley trying to turn this team around. And my God, did he have a great season in terms of Maryland production is concerned. He was 8-5, 4-5 in the conference. He's got 11 returning starters and a reasonable schedule. It's 55 toughest in the country. I'll start with you, Bryan. What are your thoughts on the Terrapins?
Well, since you're so close, I'll say what they don't want to hear out in those parts. Maryland is 3-22 combined against Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State. So that falls right in line with the pecking order we're going through here. I don't think they've ever beaten a ranked team on the road. under Loxley, which
That's
is not
correct.
good. They did win the bowl game. NC State was a ranked team, technically number 25. So that's sort of the hill they've got to get over. It's going to be a similar discussion when we talk Penn State, right? That
Yep.
I think it might be a ranked. It's ranked game opponents. Period, not just the road that Maryland
It's
struggles on.
top. I got two and 23 versus top 25 in Mike Loxley's career. That's what
Yeah.
I have.
Okay. So they've got to get over that hurdle. I mean, they have to go to Ohio State, who will be off a bye. That's not a great spot in October. Late in the year, they play Michigan at home, which is a great spot because Michigan's
Yes.
going to be between the Penn State game and they've got Ohio State on deck. So that's an interesting spot to maybe back Maryland. Obviously, I mean, that's what, it's more 4 months away, but it jumps out to me. Maryland gets Penn State at home too. So two of the three big boys they do get at home late in the year. So I'm kind of looking at Maryland over its win total. I mean, everyone thinks it's the fourth best team in this division, which you're like, okay, how fired up can you get? But I think there's a definite gap between Maryland and the bottom three. And Maryland is probably closer, believe it or not, to the top three than they are the bottom three. So I kind of see this as a program on the rise in this division. And, coming off a bowl win, 8-win season, you get two of the top three at home. I think there's a lot to like here. They've just got to get over that mental hurdle of beating those top three teams.
Yeah, I agree more. And actually, you must have read my notes. I don't know how you read my notes, but I said there's a perfect sandwich spot towards the end of the year because you have you have Michigan pretty much sitting. They have to go at Penn State, then they go play Maryland at home, and then they got to go play Ohio State. It's like the perfect sandwich spot of all sandwich spots. And what pisses me off, and I was talking to, I work with a lot of guys from the that came from Penn State or alma maters in Penn State, and I asked them, I'm like, I know Fox kind of owns the rights to the Big Ten now in their games. It's like, is that going to be a whiteout game? Because that'd be a perfect whiteout game to go play Michigan. He says no, because Fox, because they're going to make that thing a noon game, which makes that an even worse spot for Penn State. But we'll talk about Penn State in a second. Maryland here, new OC takes over here. Josh Gaddis is the OC. If you remember him, he was the one that kind of turned Michigan around a little bit on the offensive side here in 2021. And he also worked with Loxley and Bama. So there's also that camaraderie there. And then we have to do with Tulila. I always say that name wrong. I always want to say Tua, but it's not Tua. It's Tua's brother. Still there. I think he's been there for 8 years. Back under center. Had a decent year last year, 67% pass completion rate, 18 touchdowns, 8 INTs. And they get their top 6 rushers back in the backfield, including 1,000-yard rusher Roman Hembley, who's absolutely electric for him, 5.3 yards per carry. The wide receiver core, they get their top 2 passing targets back in Deshaun Jones and Corey Deitch. And they also add an intricate guy in here. When they went to the transfer portal, they went and got some key receivers. One receiver that maybe people will start noticing from FIU, he had 1,000 yards receiving for them in Tyrese Chambers, as well as Caden Prather from Western Virginia. He wasn't the top target in there, but he had 600 or 700 yards receiving for them. So solid unit overall for the wide receivers. The O-line coming into the season, a lot of inexperience on that end. A little bit of a concern on my part when you actually look at their stats. Coming off a 3.9 yards per carry rushing, given up, they gave up 43 sacks, 9.3 sack rate. So whatever they did to kind of mold that line, hopefully there's no way to go but up for them. They're just going to have to protect the quarterback, especially when you actually got some good weapons on the wide receiver end, as well as a great backfield. So hopefully they can, improve on the blocking. Defensive line, full rebuild. But what they did, Mike Loxley did a great job in the transfer portal, got some P5 guys to kind of fill in the roles, ACC, SEC transfers. So that, those are going to be key. I think the athleticism is really going to pick up in there despite the inexperience. Linebackers, they do lose basically just 2 backups. But they have a talented guy, had a great year last year. I think he was a freshman, Jay-Sean Barnum. So solid unit altogether. They did allow 24 points per game, so hopefully they can improve on that. Um, for the D-backs, last season, their top 2 tacklers were the safeties. So that tells you what the defense was last year. You don't want that. You want it to
No,
be the
no.
linebackers, basically. Those are the guys you want to be
Yeah,
the guys to stop, right? So, but they're great. They're great safeties. We got Bo Braid, Dante Trader. Those guys are back. They did allow 57.2 pass completion rate, 223 yards per game. Not great, but they can improve on that. They lose their 2 starting corners, but don't worry here, folks. They get a great transfer from Cincinnati, and you're going to know about this, John, and Jaquan Shepard. He was their best corner at Cincinnati, comes over to Maryland. So they're deep. They're, hopefully, from the coverage standpoint, that's going to be a strength for them. Hopefully, they aren't the ones getting all the tackles. So toughest games for them, really on the board. I always look at this for Maryland. Okay, like Bryan said, Mike Locksley against top 25 teams always been a struggle. So what do? You look at how many ranked opponents do they have to face this year? I could only find 3. It's going to be Ohio State. It's going to be Penn State. It's going to be Michigan. Okay. So you take those guys out of the equation. They're very good against non-conference teams, and they're good against unranked opponents.
8 straight wins in the non-conference.
There you go. Absolutely. So that's good. So when you look at them going into conference play, they're going to be set up perfectly, even though they're not great against top 25. They can figure out just how to get over the hump. They've really played some real close games. I think they played a close game against Maryland last year, only losing by. I'm sorry, Michigan last year, only losing by 7 points. So I see this team getting at least 8 or 9 wins. They're bringing back enough experience for me. They're bringing back the quarterback that's been there forever. So the over and under on this one is 7.5 wins. This one to me is one of my best picks of this episode. I like this Maryland team getting over the hump.
If they beat either Penn State or Michigan at home, then it's a lock that they go over this total. Because you're right, those are the only 3 ranked teams they're going to play, and as we already said, 2 of those are at home. The Ohio State game, I think, is the one obvious loss that you're looking at here. But you look at the offensive side of the ball. You mentioned Tagovailoa, easy for us to say.
Yes.
Is back. I mean, Maryland's got one of the more stable quarterback situations going into the season, right? Other than like Michigan, like where are there less question marks under center in this division?
Right.
Than here in Maryland. Defensively, they made big strides last year. They gave up 7 points per game less than they had the previous year. I mean, they were down, it was 23.2 points per game they allowed last year. That is a 7-year low. I mean, this is a team that we had seen giving up a lot of points previously. So, yeah, between the schedule, if the defense can maintain its improvement from last year, and the quarterback stays healthy, there is no reason why the Maryland Terrapins don't go over 7.5 wins here in 2023. I think that number seems low. I concur with you.
Yeah, I mean, I see them going 5-0 right up to that Ohio State game, and that's going to be a tough one for them. But when you look at the rest of the conference, it's going to be spotty. But maybe they, who knows? You may see an upset there. I don't know, but Mike, what he's got there. But
and look at their 3 road games besides Ohio State in the conference. Michigan State, Rutgers, Nebraska, and Northwestern. So that's 4, actually.
Yeah.
I mean, those are like the bottom tier teams. So they're the road games are the easier opponents. That's what you want. So again, yeah, I think it sets up pretty well for Maryland to inch closer to those top 3. Remember, only 4 bowl teams in this division last year.
Yeah. So and Maryland coming off what was extremely promising for them. I see this on the up and up for Mike Locksley and the crew. Before we go into the next game, I gotta say shout out to everybody that's watching us live on YouTube and Twitter. And make sure if you haven't yet, please subscribe to the Sports Wagering Network YouTube for all the content that's going to come this football season. It's going to be absolutely electric. And if you wanted to know what I was pumping out last year, my record was 169, 136 and 6 plus 45 units, baby, 55.4%. And you know what the hell I did in bowl season. I put up over 20 units there alone. And then you check my 3-year total here, 40, 371 and 7 plus 80.2 units, 54.3%. I hit in volume. I cocked the gun and I fired the shot. That's how it's done here, folks. That's how we go into what is the top end of the Big Ten East. and we're going to start this off in University Park, PA. James Franklin doing things for the Nittany Lions. 11-2 season plus a Rose Bowl win, 7-2 in the conference. 16 starters back, 8 on the offensive side, 8 on the defense, and they get a favorable schedule here, 60th toughest in the country. I only see 2 tough games for them on this one. I do have a good take on the win total. What's your thoughts, Bryan?
So I don't. They're probably feeling like, okay, we could challenge Michigan, we could challenge Ohio State coming into the year. You talked about the schedule; it's not hard. They get Michigan at home. They do have to go to Ohio State. They've been. I think you mentioned at the top, right, that they have struggled really well. Well, they've struggled with both those teams. Franklin's always struggled with top 10 teams, but they've played Ohio State tough. Remember that game last year?
Yeah.
How it looked like Penn State was going to win, then all of a sudden it just all came crumbling down, and they didn't even cover. They didn't even. Oh, they did cover. They barely. That's right. They did still cover the number. Thankfully, I think I had them in that game, and I was worried.
They also played Michigan really well up to the third quarter, and they just completely fell apart. 25 unanswered points, I believe that was on that game. So
that's right. Well, they couldn't stop the run. They couldn't, because remember everyone was talking about the 2 great run defenses, and Michigan just ran all over them.
Right.
I don't see that happen again. But you look at this schedule, yeah. There's some cupcakes on there. There's a lot of winnable games. They went from 7 to 11 wins, and you mentioned the Rose Bowl victory last year. I don't think the record's going to be as good this year. Actually, I don't see them matching last year's record. I still think it's going to be a very good team. I do not see them winning the division, but I mean, they'll be in the mix, I guess. And if they can beat Michigan at home, or if they can go to Ohio State and win, then I guess maybe all of a sudden, there is no reason that they can't contend for division. But of course, that's just been a hill that Franklin's been unable to climb.
Yeah. I think this is from a win total perspective. I looked at that. They're 9.5 wins on the over and under on the wins. You're basically looking at this as there's 2 tough games for them. I see. It's at Ohio State and it's Michigan. It's always the same ones. And then you look at the rest of their schedule and everything's winnable. You're also gambling on the fact that they're bringing in a new quarterback. Clifford's gone. Clifford, what was he, like second or all-time leading passer for Penn State or something like that? He's high up there anyways in Penn State.
But they're high on his replacement. They're very high on his replacement, Aller.
Yeah, they love Aller a lot. He's a high prospect. When he did get playing time, his numbers were great. But, I don't know. I didn't go and look at the spots where he actually went in there and played. He had 9 games in his career, but all of his numbers were completely solid. So I think the transition, he may be better than Clifford over time, and I think he should be. And then you look at the running backs on this one. Nick Singleton's back, absolutely electric guy, 6.8 yards per carry, and Katron Allen's back, 5.2 yards per carry. So running the ball, they're in good hands. And I think Aller is a mobile quarterback as well. Now you got to look at the wide receivers on this one. They do lose their top 2 receivers, but they add one of the top receivers in the MAC, and Dayton Cephas from Kent State. If you remember him, he had some electric numbers there. And they had a wide receiver from Florida State to fill in the void. I don't think there's much of a drop-off there. Granted, they did lose Washington, which is their top wide receiver. But I always saw this team more of a run-oriented squad. Offensive line, once again, improved. Most of the starters back from last season. They lacked experience, but they can play it at a high level. If they can stay healthy, they'll be one of the best units in the country, especially with the running backs that they have in the backfield. They do, on the defensive side, they do lose their top tackler from last season, but they get back their number 2 and the number 5. Their defensive line loses 2 starters, but they have this guy that I love, and I love the name. I love a good college name, Chop Robinson. If you ever watch this guy, this dude's electric. Came from Maryland last season and absolutely stepped into that defense and fit in perfectly. I think he's going to have a phenomenal year. This is a line that had 43 sacks last season, so they're going to be really good. The linebacker core on this one stays basically intact. Should be one of the best linebacker groups in the country. They did allow 18.2 points per game last season. Secondary, always strong for PSU. They lose starting corner and strong safety, but they get back Kalen King. Kalen King is an absolute star and should be a top draft pick, and they fill in the voids on the coverage with juniors and seniors. So there is experience there for the Nittany Lions. So the defense to me is their strength. They're in a great position. They should improve their numbers from last season on the defensive side, in my opinion. 323 yards per game last season, 18.2 points per game. I see two tough games on the schedule, like I mentioned, at Ohio State and Michigan at home. Michigan at home should be a really is this going to be a good season? Is this not going to be a good season? They play November 11th. They're going to have to play during the day. Unfortunately, it's not going to be a whiteout.
Well, and we'll get into it later maybe, but
Yeah.
Michigan's going to be undefeated coming into that game.
Oh, yeah.
Michigan for sure is going to be 9-0 heading into that game. So
yeah, the last 3 games of the season are going to decide Michigan. We'll get to them shortly. Penn State, solid overall, great schedule. They lose Clifford, but get Aller. He's going to fit in there perfectly. 2 tough games on the schedule. If you do the math, 12 minus 2 is 10, and you get you can go to the book right now. I looked it up, 9.5 wins. I'm just going to gamble on them here, and I like the over on this one. I think they're still at the same spot they were last year, even with Aller. I just can't see anybody else in the conference beating them. Ohio State, on their schedule, anyways. Ohio State, Michigan. I think they're in the same boat.
They go at Illinois early for the conference open, and then they have Iowa coming to State College. So, in Iowa, we'll talk about that.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah,
they could lose one, but if they are able to beat either Ohio State or Michigan, then all of a sudden, this win total does. You know what? You've kind of convinced me a little bit that just as I just go through the schedule that I can't see them losing 3 games. That would mean that they lose to both Michigan and Ohio State again, and they lose either at Illinois or Iowa early in the year. The one concern I have is there was a big jump in offensive production last year. They averaged almost 36 points per game after averaging 25 the previous year.
Mm-hmm.
New quarterback. I know they're high on him. Do we see a little bit of a drop off? Is my question. I think the year after that, that's a pretty sizable jump. You hear, my goodness, 36 points per game. That's quite a few. I don't know if we're going to see that again, but if they do, if the kid's the real deal and they can win one of those 2 big games, then I guess you're right. This over probably is a lock.
Right. Yeah. That I kind of see it ending on those 2 games, but you did mention Iowa, so that may be the deciding factor if they get over that 10 win total of the regular season. I saw 9.5, and I was like, I just got to get 10. I see 10 here, and I'm basically saying Aller is the guy. And if he's going to have growing pains, have him early and not before any of these big games. Especially, you mentioned Iowa could be a game that could decide the whole thing for him. Going on to the last 2, and of course, we got to go over these 2 teams. These are the pillars of the Big Ten. Ohio State we'll start with here. Columbus, Ohio, Ryan Day, back-to-back losses to Michigan. I don't know if you're able to keep your job if that was back in the day, but hell, he made a great push to, if they would have made that field goal, honestly, probably would have won the national championship in the next game, because I know I would have picked Ohio State. 11-2 last year, 8-1 in the conference, 27th toughest schedule this year. What are your thoughts on the Buckeyes, Bryan?
Yeah, I feel that Ohio State, is this the first time in forever they might be a little under the radar? Because you brought up the semifinal game against Georgia. I know Michigan's going to make a similar argument that they thought they should have probably won their semifinal as well. But Ohio, you talk about your bowl season. Ohio State was my biggest play of the entire college postseason against Georgia. That was an easy winner, plus the points. Ohio State, I thought, was the second best team in college football last year. They just played a terrible second half against Michigan. You talked about Ryan Day and what they're thinking about him in Columbus right now. I can tell you here in Cleveland up I-71. People were ready to just hang this guy out to dry after that second half because he was badly outcoached by Harbaugh. They sold out to stop the run, and Michigan just threw it over the top and made him look silly, right? But people forget Ohio State was winning that game at halftime.
Yep, that's true.
So you're talking about they were beating Michigan at the half. They could have beaten Georgia in the semifinal. This I had them power rated all year as the second best team behind Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting. It's just going to come down to the Michigan game, right? I will say though, their schedule is not great. They have 3 tough road games, not just Michigan. They have to go to Camp Randall to face Wisconsin, who's the presumed favorite to win the West.
Yep.
And as I'm sure you're well aware, Guns,
Yes.
earlier in the year they go to South Bend to play Notre Dame. It would surprise me if Ohio State were to win all 3 of those games.
Right.
Or maybe they drop one. So I mean, you're looking at a win total of what, 10 and a half?
Right.
I don't know if I love that. And we were talking about before backstage before the show began. Like, if you think they're going to win the division, there's no point to like betting it now or the comp, because you're going to probably get the same odds as you can see right now when they on the money line when they go to Ann Arbor in the last game.
Right.
So
Exactly.
you might as well just wait. And the big question mark, as I'm sure you're going to get into here, is quarterback.
Yeah.
It always helps that they've got the best receiver group in the country, it seems like, every year.
Yeah.
But no one does a better job of recruiting receivers than Heartline. But that's the one question mark I think we have, because you lose CJ Stroud. And it's funny when you look at rivalries, they have a funny way of turning, right? I mean, Ohio State just owned Michigan for what? Like it felt like 20 years.
It did.
It felt like 100 years as a Michigan fan.
I think they might have had like one win sometime in like 2011 or 12, but it seemed like it was just Ohio State.
Yeah, but getting back to how the faithful feel about Day, there were, Tressel and Urban Meyer, they never got out coached by their counterparts at Michigan. Now all of a sudden, Ryan Day, he looked befuddled, he looked confused. Does he give up some of the play calling duties? I know a lot of people want to see that happen. It's neck and neck. It's them and Michigan to win this division, and it's almost certainly come down to November 25th in Ann Arbor to decide the division once again. But can Michigan make it 3 in a row over Ohio State? It's in Ann Arbor. So I guess we could kind of just talk about it when we talk about both teams. But that's the game right there. It is the biggest game every year in this conference, and it will, of course, again decide not just this division, but probably who wins the Big Ten as a whole, because the East winner always wins the Big Ten championship game.
Sure.
Literally has never lost.
Yeah, and maybe, who knows, maybe even you got Iowa in there and Wisconsin. We'll talk about them tomorrow. There may be some good spots there and an improved group. But yeah, you mentioned CJ Stroud leaving there. That's probably the biggest concern there. Kyle McCord is going to be taking over. He's been there since Stroud. I think he came in the same class as Stroud. Been backing him up the whole time. He's only got one start under his belt. Is he going to be competing with the touted freshman Devin Brown? I'm not entirely sure. I'd probably go with Kyle McCord on this one. I think he's going to be the starter in week 1. Running backs, the unit brings back their top 4 rushers, Mayan Williams and Trevion Henderson. Plenty of weapons in the backfield for him, so they're going to be comfortable there. Wide receivers, like you mentioned, Bryan, that probably the best in the country. They get Marvin Harrison Jr. back and Emeka Igbuka, and both of those guys eclipsed over 1,000 yards. And after losing Jackson Smith-Njigba in week 1 against Notre Dame, those guys really stepped up into the role and just took over.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Yeah, he hardly played. Imagine if he would have played. I think he had a little bit of that, NFL-itis in his knee or something like that during the course of the year, which is, hey, it's okay. I mean, it's his life, So, but yeah, I mean, it's so, there's that old adage, they don't rebuild, they reload. So, I mean, everything's going to be surrounding the new quarterback to come in and do well. I mean, this is an offense that puts up like 40 points per game every year. Yeah, it'll be interesting. It all boils down to that. If the kid looks good, then this is a team that absolutely can win the division as it can any year and move on to the playoff.
Yeah, and then you always look at their offensive line too. Losing 3 starters, but they had 2 transfers with starting experience. Should have a top level recruits as well. I never doubt anything that Ohio State, whether they lose a guy or not. They're always kind of filled in the role. Last year, 5.4 yards per carry to their running backs. Only allowed 12 sacks all season, 2.9 sack rate. Absolutely amazing for this team. Three top tacklers are back on the defensive side. Defensive line should be relatively brand new, but I'm not worried about them filling in the gaps. Linebackers will be tough as well. 3 starters back, and they had a transfer from Oklahoma State. Remember I believe the defensive coordinator, second year out of Oklahoma State, came over. I think he's the DC over there. Second year in the defense, and you know how Oklahoma State's defense were when he was there. Corners should be depleted. But they do get to the transfer portal, get a guy from Syracuse and Ole Miss to kind of fill in the voids. So time will tell. See if the corners will really step up. Like I said, Jim Knowles, that's who I was trying to think of. DC for them, Oklahoma. 7 starters back. D line linebackers will be their strength. Tough schedule, like you mentioned, at Notre Dame, at Wisconsin, at Michigan, and then they get Penn State at home. I'm not worried about Penn State. I think Ohio State kind of owns them a little bit. We'll see if hell, it might be a good game. I don't know.
Yeah.
Comes down to 2 games for them, I think. I mean, how Camp Randall's always a tough game. I kind of throw that aside as maybe the third one. At Michigan and at Notre Dame. I know, Notre Dame, looking at them, I haven't really talked about them too much. I know Sam Hartman's there. I just don't know if Freeman's got the gusto to get over a team like an Ohio State, a Georgia, an Alabama, etc. That I call it the upper tier. They're just one tier down. We'll see. They got all the advantages in the world. Probably going to be a night game, hopefully. We'll see, but that will be a tough one, and also Michigan. But this is a team that got a chip on their shoulder. They missed a field goal to win a national championship. A lot of these guys are still there. This is a team that, even though you can't really say they're under the radar, but I think everybody's saying Michigan is this and Ohio State is number 2 now. And when you have Ohio State with a chip on their shoulder, they're considered the dog back against the wall. I probably trust the Buckeyes more than I trust Michigan any day of the week. So we'll see how the season plans out. It could come down to that last game of the season. Like you said, the rivalry, going over to Michigan, that's going to be what's going to be the deciding factor. No play on the total on this one, on the win totals at all. As Bryan drops out, must have had an internet problem on this one. We'll see if he returns. And it's unfortunate because we're going to be talking about his guys over in Ann Arbor, Michigan. And this is the Wolverines made the college football playoff. Disappointed once again, Jim Harbaugh, but he did win the Big Ten again. Strong unit offensively when you break this down. But let's talk about what they did last season. 13-1, 9-0 in the conference, 15 starters back, 8 on the offensive side, 7 on the defensive side. 67th toughest schedule, Jim Harbaugh, of course, the coach. Offensively, you got to look at the QB situation. Now, J.J. McCarty is going to be back in the offense, so they should be good hands there. 64.6 pass completion rate, 22 touchdowns, 5 INTs last year. Absolutely solid. I think he's going to improve this year with the schedule that he's got. Running backs, 1-2 punch is back, and they actually got a legitimate 1-2 punch. Probably the best, one of the best duos in the country here with Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards. Edwards really stepped his game up after Corum's injury in the Ohio State game. Both of these guys ran for over 1,000 yards, so I expect these two to just do the same. This is an absolutely astounding running back Corum. Wide receiver, they did lose their number 3 guy, Schoonmaker, and they lose Ronnie Bell, their number 1 guy. But everyone else is back, so it should be interesting to see who the top guy is. I won't put anything behind what Jim Harbaugh is doing. I think that team is going to be fine offensively. So breaking down the offensive line on this one, last year, the top offensive line in the country, 5.6 yards per carry, only 7 sacks. This was a line that had a tremendous year. They get 3 starters back, plus they add some transfers with a lot of experience so to fill in the voids at center and left tackle, which went to the NFL. As we get Bryan back, I'm on Michigan right now, halfway through my rant, and I know you are wearing the colors, I believe, on the screen. I'll stop right now. I'm at the offensive line. What are your thoughts on the Wolverines this season? I think he's got he's backed out on the internet. Okay, I'm sorry about that. Sorry about the technical difficulties, but hey, this is the internet, baby. right, so back on the offensive line on this one, 3 starters back, and they had some depth on the defense on the offensive line. Offense should be better this season, despite the wide receiver core. I think they're going to be really heavy on the run. Solid offensive line, QB and running backs. Offense is going to be tough to beat. Defensively, tough unit again. 6 out of their top 7 tacklers are back for the Michigan Wolverines. Defensive line, a lot of talent, but they only bring back 2 starters. So they went to the transfer portal and actually got a solid guy, Coastal Carolina's Josiah Stewart. Hopefully he's going to blend in fine over there with stronger competition. Linebackers are strong again. 3 starters back for them. No problems with the linebacker core for Michigan. Secondary back 3 starters with starting experience. Plus, they get the top corner from UMass to come over and help out with the depth. Their defense last year only had 4 starters, so take that into consideration. They have 7 starters back on the defense last year, only 4 last year, and they actually improved their numbers. This is a team that only gave up 292 yards per game, 16.1 points per game. So they're going to be tough once again. 2 tough games in the schedule, maybe 3. And we did talk about the sandwich action on Penn State and Ohio State with Maryland in the middle. It's going to really come down to those 2 games. It's going to come down to Penn State with a chip on their shoulder after a complete collapse from Penn State in the 4th quarter, just getting outrun and outgashed by that Michigan State offense. And Ohio State at home. Ohio State back-to-back losses to Michigan. I think they're going to be coming out here ready to go. But from at least you get Ohio State at home, so that is a benefit to you. You got to look at the spot. Maryland only lost by 7 to Michigan last year, I believe. Maybe yes. I think it's going to be one of those sandwich spots that we're going to look at on November 18th. So mark that on your calendars. So overall, look at the outlook. Favorable schedule for them. No opponents in the top 25 in their first 9 games, in my opinion, unless something else happens. And then we got Bryan back.
Yes.
I'm finishing up my rant, and then I'll pass it to you on Michigan here.
Okay.
So they get home. I mean, look at their schedule. They could get through the last gauntlet of the season. It's all going to come down to those last 3 games, that last 3 window, which is going to be tough for them. But it is Michigan. They've done it before. They've been in these spots, but they really packed. What they did is they packed in Penn State and Ohio State, maybe for some reason to get Ohio State back over the hump. Who knows? But we'll have to see about that one. I'm going to have no play on the total in this one. I just think Michigan is going to be a good team. It's going to come down to last games in the season. What are your thoughts, Bryan?
Yeah, making the playoff 3 years in a row is hard to do. By the way, thank you for your patience, everyone. What a nothing worse than when the internet goes out right in the morning.
We improvise here.
Yeah,
I'm ready to talk.
Okay, here we go. But that's good. One last thing I wanted to say about Ohio State. When you look at because you have to almost analyze Ohio State, Michigan like together, right? Yeah. Ohio State getting its bye early in the season, I don't know if that's a great thing for them. Whereas Michigan gets the bye not directly before that 3-game gauntlet you brought up, but right there's a game
Oh no. I think you're breaking up there, Bryan. All right, we'll see if we can get Bryan back on this one. He's breaking up a little bit. I'm gonna wait and see if he fixes that up. But we just talked about every single team on the board. We'll see if we can get a take on Bryan from Michigan when he comes back. But we're gonna talk about futures on this one here, folks. So future picks on this one, I did express some of them on this one. I think there's really 3 spots that you can look at for the Big Ten East. Granted, I'm not the most lucrative. I'm going to spend all my wad on a lot of these win totals. But when I look at their schedule and I look at everything all together, I think these are the best spots on the board. So I mentioned Michigan State under 5.5. I think that's still available in this one. I think this team is on the downward spiral, even though they had 5 wins last season. they don't have a real good quarterback situation. You have players just mass exited out of there in the spring. There's something going on with that program, something fishy. I think Mel Tucker was probably a bad extension hire. It doesn't seem he's earning his paycheck. So we'll see if we get Bryan back here. We'll go back to Michigan. Hopefully your internet doesn't cut out again.
I know. That's unbelievable. What's going on? Only when it gets to the top two teams. Look, I'm with you. I don't want to make a wager on Michigan because getting the playoff 3 years in a row, like I said, is difficult to do. But they're going to be favored in every game this year.
Yes.
So, if they can do, and again, they've only had one loss in the conference the last 2 years to Michigan State of all teams, who's kind of been a bogey team for them, used to be a bogey team for them under Mark D'Antonio. So, I'm not in a rush to bet them over the win total. One thing with McNamara gone, they've got less of a safety net at quarterback. We'll obviously talk about McNamara tomorrow with Iowa. So they can ill afford any injuries. But look, they are on paper the best team in the Big Ten. There's no denying that. Harbaugh has done what the faithful wanted. Being favored in every game. It's interesting because this is the first year now where Michigan is clearly being viewed as the superior team to Ohio State. Michigan obviously feels it should have been in the championship game last year as well. What an absolutely just an atrocity against TCU in the semifinal.
Yeah, I mean now that for the first time ever, I think this season for sure, big target on their back, and I think a lot of teams are going to be really excited to play them and play up to a high level. I think Penn State, and then like we talked about the last 3 games of the season, absolute gauntlet for them. That's going to decide everything. Well, all right. Now let's go into the futures and break this down for the people. And this is what everybody's waiting for. Like I said, I don't go and I spend all my entire account on these win totals. I don't like tying my money up on futures because I like to just take them week to week. A lot of injuries happen, a lot of outliers. So, but I will give you my top 3 picks for the East on this one as far as win totals are concerned. I like the over 7.5 for Maryland. I think this is going to be an improved team. And then we got the Michigan State under 5.5. I don't think this is a bowl team, and this is what this number is saying. Is this a bowl team? Is this not a bowl team? On paper, doesn't look like one. And like I said with Penn State, I see them with 10 wins, and the line sitting at 9.5. I think this is an over on this one. I think they can get through everybody, and it's going to come down to Michigan and Ohio State at the end of the day to decide their season. So those are the 3 picks: Michigan State under 5.5, Maryland over 7.5, and the over Penn State 9.5. What are your thoughts, Bryan?
I'm going to have way more of these tomorrow in the West. I think there's a lot more value. I think the only one that I like here, and you just brought up, is Maryland over 7.5. That to me, because this is a team that won 8 games, should be better, favorable schedule. So that is the only one I like here in the East. The West is a different story. We'll have a lot to talk about with what we could sprinkle on Wisconsin and Iowa in particular. But yeah, that is the only one I like is Maryland over that win total.
Beautiful. Full alignment with the hat. We're going to say that is the over in this one. So Bryan Power joining us, and I appreciate it. I put Powers in there. My fault. And I was trying to change it on the fly, and it didn't work.
Yeah, there's been a lot of that's all right, but I got no room to talk, man, with some technical difficulties here down the stretch. So.
Right. All good. We're going to be back tomorrow, 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time to talk the other side with the West. And Bryan, just tell the people where they can find you.
WagerTalk.com. You mentioned it earlier. Last year, college football, I was number 1 on the site with plays rated 4% or higher. That is over the course of the full season. Was very proud of that. Of course, right now it's summer. We're in the throes of baseball. Baseball's been great too. Number 1 in baseball going back to last year's playoffs at Wager Talk. So check me out again, wagertalk.com. Bryan Power is the place. Always have plays loaded every day for you across a variety of sports, getting ready for football season. And it's going to be a great year.
Yeah. And make sure you check us out tomorrow for the West for the college football preview show. We're going to do this weekly with special guests along the way. So please subscribe and hit the notification bell on the Sports Wagering Network. And also you can check me out on Twitter. If you do have a Twitter, at Gunzpicks, you see my name right there and how it's spelled. I'm also doing F5 baseball and trying to grind my way through the the system that I've been putting into place on this one. So bear with me on that one, folks. That's going to do it for this show. Please check us out tomorrow. Bryan, thank you for joining me today. And let's cash some tickets today. Let's win some baseball bets. Let's win some football bets this year. Let's have ourselves a damn season. And as always, let's keep dancing. Bang.